Well, hello everyone. Um, I created a few weeks ago, I created a Grimdark Future tier list, and the video I think was pretty well received by the community, but also a lot of people were asking me a lot of questions, both on YouTube, but also just reaching out to me privately and asking me some questions about, hey, how do you figure this out? So I wanted to sort of say that in that tier list that I created, and I'll include a link in the description. Um, that obviously I've done a lot of research the last several months, not just for 3.2, but also even going back, doing a lot of testing games, not just playing with other players. Both of us were bringing sort of competitive lists at the time. Also, so playing in person, but also doing a lot of play testing on Tabletop Simulator. And what I found here is I gathered a lot of data and I sort of created this tier list video, but there was a lot that I just sort of couldn't include. And so with that, I got a lot of people asking questions. And one they were asking is, okay, where did you sort of come up with this criteria about balancing and coming up with this tier list? The other, question I actually got several times was, I had had alien hives as an S tier army, and other people actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm having problems with alien hives. I'm facing some alien hive players, and they're just murdering everybody." So I thought about, how do I want to approach it? And what I decided to do is to start creating some faction specific videos that I'm calling advanced tactics. And then I'm going to focus on the faction. We're going to look at the army. We're going to talk about how do you play the army, what makes it so well, and sort of going in alphabetical order. I think it's a really good start to talk about alien hives. So I have it here, and I'll stand by this that alien hives are a broken army. They're nuts. They're broken. The power level on alien hives is absolutely incredible. And I want to talk about why I think that they're broken. We're going to look at some armies, and then I'm also going to propose a couple of fixes that I think can help sort of better address why I think alien hives are, how to sort of bring them in line with the rest of the armies. I've played a lot of Alien Hypes games. I've posted some on my YouTube channel, but there's also several games that I just didn't post because, like, the games were just boring. Like, the games I would play with my Alien Hives army, I would just murder the other army so fast that I literally didn't post it to my YouTube channel because I thought it was just not fun to watch. As a YouTuber, I am trying to create content that's a little interesting. And that was sort of worrying to me that if I can sort of play games with alien hives and not have fun, how many other people are possibly playing games of Grimdark Future, facing some alien hives and just getting absolutely murdered? So, it is something that I'm worried about. And so let's get into alien hives here. I want to go over some of my assumptions that I talked about in previous videos. So let's just run off these assumptions, one of which these assumptions are sort of based on how I'm rating these armies. So obviously I'm rating and competing against only other official armies. So I think there's a lot of really good custom armies out there that I think help the balance of Grimdark Future. But for the tier list, I am sort of comparing it against other armies. And for that, Alien Hives is just head and shoulders above all other armies in the official Grimdark Future lists. The other thing, again, I get into this, I'm assuming sort of this 5 or 6 game grand tournament format where the army you have to play does have to have some consistency, does have to have a way to have a consistent strategy that's also able to be applied across multiple different armies. I'm generally talking about 3,000 points. I think 3,000 points is generally where a competitive armies are going to have to fall. I think that a lot of people who are looking at 2,000 points as the standard, it's too small. I think that if you want to get into the points thing, about how points are figured out compared to 40K, it's about double. Roughly speaking, Grimdark Future and OPR is about double the points of what an army is. So when you look at a 2,000 point game of OPR, you're really, especially in Grimdark Future, you're really looking at about an 1,000 point game in 40K, which is just small. So I generally look at a competitive to be around 3,000 points in 40K terms. That's going to be around 1,500 to 1,750 ish, which is actually the standard 40K format. The other thing is that I don't include his allies. We have to look at these armies not just competing wholly against each other, but also no allies. So these are just the assumptions that I originally built the tier list that I'm just sort of reiterating. You can go look at the tier list as a separate bit. I'll include that, but for now, let's just get into alien hives. So this is the criteria that I set up for the tier list. Flexibility, one very strong playstyle. The other thing it is what I call raw efficiency, right? So units in this game, they don't have pistol taxes or hybrid taxes. They're very streamlined to do one thing very well. Because of the nature of the point system and one-page rules, it really does favor very streamlined targeted units, that a unit is going to do one thing very well and not sort of waste points on maybe an extra shooting weapon. The other thing that I think in criteria is a good spell list. When I mean a good spell list, I mean a spell list that synergizes very well with the army. Um, Impactful elites. So an army that generally has some quality 2 and quality 3 elites for that consistency. Cheap chaff. So that's generally in the quality 6, quality 5 and 6 chaff. 6 is even better. The other thing that I think that we're going to talk about is multiple meaningful upgrades. There's two upgrades that I particularly look at: Caster 3 and Advanced Tactics. Access to Scout and Ambush. Scout and Ambush are just a very important part of the competitive meta for Grimdark Future. These two rules really, I actually had people in my tier list ask me about, well, shooting armies are really powerful. And why do I sort of value like hand-to-hand close combat armies? And it's the reason Scout and Ambush are just, they're two rules that just really allow you to get into hand-to-hand on turn one, and it makes long-range armies not very good. For Grimdark Future, I'm not talking about Age of Fantasy, but I want to talk about AP4 in regards of Grimdark Future, because I don't think that AP4 is that good in Age of Fantasy. I think that Age of Fantasy honestly is a better balanced game, and a lot of Age of Fantasy actually doesn't have access to a lot of defense too. Grimdark Future isn't the case. Just about every vehicle and a lot of monsters and a lot of units are have access to def too. So when we look, and again, I want to focus on Grimdark Future. AP4 is a lot more valuable contextually in Grimdark Future. The last criteria I always look at as a slight plus is undead. Undead is, I think, actually should be worth a little points. I think that undead being costing no points, I think is not correct. I think that is something that I would hope the OPA would really evaluate in the future and start adding some points, because I think that undead is just better than being a regular unit. All right, so that's great criteria. Let's now stack up alien hives and compare it, and why I think it's an S tier army. So obviously you can look at this. Alien hives check all the boxes except being undead. Alien hives aren't undead, but everything else on this list, flexible, they're efficient, a great spell list, impactful elites, but also cheap chaff. They've got multiple meaningful upgrades. Alien Hives have not only a good spell list, but they've got the Caster 3 and they've got advanced tactics, which they're called pheromones. They have some of the best scout and ambush units in the game. Honestly, they have some of the best casters in the game. They have some of the best spell lists in the game. They have some of the best hand-to-hand units in the game. They have some of the cheapest chaff in the game. And they've got access to AP4. Them and maybe a couple of other armies are just a lot of access to AP4. So when I start sort of looking at my criteria, I didn't build my criteria for alien hives. I built my criteria separately, and then I sort of noticed that alien hives met all these criteria here. So that's one thing I want to show you here. This is a good reason about why I value alien hives as an S tier, what I call a broken army, right? When I'm talking about an S tier army, I mean it's a broken army. It's an army that, to be frank, needs to be nerfed. All right, so let's get into a little bit more. I want to so let's get into the specifics here. I've sort of covered there. Let's now in this video that's specifically covering alien hives. Let's get into some of the specifics about how I think this army works so well. For that, we're going to talk about the units themselves, but we're also going to cover four lists. We're going to talk about a standard list that I use, which I think is a bit of a mixed list. We're going to talk about an ambush heavy list. The other thing we're going to talk about is an activation, what I call an activation stalling list. We'll get into that. And then we're going to talk about just the shooting list. Alien Hives traditionally are a hand-to-hand army. They actually can do shooting pretty well. So I built a shooting list as well. And so with that, let's go. First of all, we're going to go through these four lists, and then I'm going to go through the specifics of the army as well and sort of cover some of the units. All right, so the first thing I want to look at here is what I actually played a lot, and this is my standard Alien Hives list. I think it's just a good list. I mean, I think the list has a little bit of everything. It's got some ambush, it's got some good chaff, it's got some good shooting, it's got spells in it. So this got Soul Snatcher, so it's got a little bit of everything. It's got some scout, got some ambush, got some shooting, got it has the caster support, and it also has some pretty good chaff here. So let's just go into this list. I've played this list half a dozen times, and I've got a couple of those reports that I've posted, and you'll see on those reports I just murder everything with this list. So first thing I think is of course a Hive Lord. What pretty much has to happen a lot of times is to just have these serrated blades. This is 12 AP4 attacks, not even including the stomp. Quality 3 death through. I put regeneration on him. And of course, he's got ambush and flying. Ambush and flying are just an incredibly good combination for the Hive Lord. This is because he can actually, when he ambushes in, he can ambush behind cover or he can ambush on the other side of a building so that it's actually very difficult to actually even shoot the Hive Lord, even if the ambushing player goes second. Because of that flying, and ignoring terrain on the charge, really it's very difficult just to deal with this. The other thing is the assault grunts. Assault grunts, I've got 3 units of them, and one thing I want to show here is just the upgrade tweaking that you can do on these. How just for sort of 5 more points, I can include some poison and melee. Furious is another, it's just 5 points. So it is an incredibly powerful upgrade that you can just, and this is really, I want to showcase just even in Assault Grunts, the power of the slight upgrades. Not a lot of armies have the ability to have such minute, but also powerful upgrades. Like you don't even have to include Furious and Melee if you really want to use these as more chaff. But when you do include Furious and Poison, these guys are actually a significant threat to do some damage here, even from 125. The other thing I run in this army is I run some shooter grunts. And one of the things that I do is I always run these with the 6-inch bios biners. These guys are quality 5, but just for 110 points, they can put out about 20 AP1 shots. They have Strider, so they can spend their first turn running up. You know, one of the things the Alien Hives have is they've got some good, what I call mid-level chaff. Chaff that they're cheap units, but they can still do some damage on people here. So I love these units as well. They're that good mid-level chaff. Let's get into Soul Snatchers. Soul Snatchers they're one of the best hand-to-hand units in the game. They're sort of the standard that have all their special rules just synergize extremely well together. Fast, Scout, and Strider. So these guys, they're setting up after the army, and they can get a turn one charge onto people with 20 attacks. If you give them in Soul Snatchers, they have the +1 attack and can get up to 30 if you give them the caster upgrade. But even without that, just 320 points for a combined squad that can just hit something on turn one with 20 rending AP1 attacks. It's these Soul Snatchers can kill a lot of things, if not heavily maim anything, even AP2 units. They don't care about regen. It's the Soul Snatchers and the fact that Alien Hives have access to Soul Snatchers. It's just one of those things. It's one of the best hand-to-hand units in the game, and Alien Hives just have access to them. But in addition to Alien Hive, they've also got Ravenous Beasts, which I just think are amazing. These units, I have these guys armed mostly with some AP4. I had a couple that I just actually I split this a little differently in that I just included some non-attacks on these guys here, just to save some points. But these guys are all, and Ravenous Beasts come with a Strider upgrade, and they can get a Scout upgrade. So Ravenous Beasts are just a terrific unit. They're only quality 4, but still, just with the amount of attacks, I could give these guys all AP 4 if I really wanted to here. I think that this is sort of a mid-level unit that I like to kind of go both ways. So let's talk about just one of the best units in the game, and that's Synapse Floaters. Synapse Floaters are the best psychic unit in the game. I can give them a combined unit of just get with their shock blasts, with their psi blasts, with a blast that's 6 blast shots coming. They also can have 6 tokens every turn. This is a unit that just has so much impact every turn. They're also with stealth. They are generally pretty tanky. They can, all their spells are terrific. We'll get into their spell list in just a second here. Their spell list really synergizes well with floaters because they sort of have that 18-inch threat range for a lot of their spells, and they have an 18-inch blast. So they can stay in that 18-inch range, benefit from their stealth, and then just be blasting things as well as casting. With 6 spell tokens, you can cast 2 to 3 spells a turn. So on the turn that they go, they can have so much impact. The Burrower is, of course, an absolute crazy upgrade that comes with, again, 12 AP 4 attacks. The surprise attack 3 is just crazy. I give in this version, I've given them both regeneration. You don't have to. And then let's talk about one of the best chaff units in the game that Alien have access to, and that's Spores. Spores with their Explode 2, quality 6, def 6. This is for 55 points. Just it's one of the best chaff units in the game. And you're going to see if there's one consistent thing in all these armies, it's spores because spores are just ridiculous. They are so efficient. Remember, these guys are going to automatically do damage the moment that someone charges them or that they charge, they're going to explode. It's unlike a lot of other quality 6 unit that can't do any damage. These guys are not only chaff, they're also a really great anti-hand-to-hand unit. Remember, these guys, a unit that is a hand-to-hand unit, if they charge them, they are going to tank 6 hits. Where a lot of other quality 6 units, they're just going to murder. And that, by the way, that means, by the way, that these spores don't activate the 3-inch consolidate. It's just a really nasty unit that I'll get into. And I think it's one of the things that makes Alien Hives just such a broken unit. Anyway, that's my standard list here. I know I'm taking some time, but I want you to sort of understand what sort of is going on in each of these lists. So my next list is what I call an ambush heavy list. So it has a Hive Lord. One thing I'm running is this Caster 3 on him just for maximum impact. He's got the 4 serrated blades. He's coming in. He's ambushing in with flying. He's casting some spells, whether that's a damage spell. Then other thing, so let's get into the spells for Alien Hive. They're some of the best spells in the game. One of the spells they have is this -2 morale. This is a great thing to cast when you charge in, just to hit things, destroy it, and then you already are just getting -1 morale. The Deadly 3 is also great. This flying spell is broken. I've talked about this before. I think that the flying spell in general in one-page rules should be removed. But if you're going to put it, don't put it in alien hives. Don't put it in an army that has access to scout and that has access to fast because it makes those units being able to ignore terrain. Putting these guys on like Ravenous Beasts, remember, Strider is one thing, but when you give these units flying, they can basically fly over chaff units from the opponent and just hit whatever they want. They can scout up, and then as we can see, or they can ambush, but you can also do this with scout units. It's an absolutely broken combo. Shriek is good. And then the other thing, they've got regeneration. Regeneration is a really good 18-inch range. It's terrific for synapse floaters to cast in this range. It's this spell list is ridiculous, but especially your -2 AP and also your flying as well. So this Hive Lord can come in here, cast a -1 AP. He can cast a damage spell, maybe a deadly, and just even more impact on this turn. So in this thing, I've also got some winged grunts. You're going to notice here, like a 20-man unit of winged grunts. So just dropping here and just, I mean, that is, and I actually have them upgraded with the 6 inchers, where these guys are just going to just ambush in, move up, and just shoot something with a massive amount of attacks. So I have two of these 20-man units. I mean, I could split them up into 4 10-mans if I wanted to. I just like them like that. The Ravenous Beast here, I have them split out between mostly serrated blades, but I also have some slashing blades for rending as well. Here, one thing is about these Ravenous Beasts, you can give them scout or ambush. You know, a lot of things in Alien Hives, their upgrades, and we'll get into this further, their upgrades are all meaningful, all useful. They are so customizable in a way that most other armies in OPR are not. They are the most customizable army in the game. I've got two of these Ravenous Beasts that I'm just rendering. One I've got with all serrated claws, so just I mean, this is so many attacks. This is coming in with 24 AP4 attacks that are Strider and that are ambushing in. Even, especially with Fast and Strider, even if they have things like, even if they have, what's the warning cry, doesn't matter. These guys are going to come in here. They're going to be able to charge past things and just murder things. So even special abilities like Warning Cry are not going to save you against these Ravenous Beasts. The Burrower is, I mean, this is one of those things that you're going to see, I have in every army, is this Burrower. Burrower is just ridiculous. 675 for 12 AP4 attacks with surprise attack, and he's got ambushing in. Just absolutely crazy. Another thing I want to talk about is this Mortar Beast here. This Mortar Beast has one of the most, to me, broken special abilities in the game, and that is the spores here. So it can shoot things and just do a blast 6 indirect. But the other thing is, I think a lot of times you almost want it to miss because this is going to create a 3-man unit of spores. This every turn, this mortar beast can create a massive spore or 3 spores. One of the things that I think makes this unit generation every turn so powerful is that these created units can contest and grab objectives. So you don't have to use these spores that are now on the first turn, your opponent does get to, on the turn they appear, your opponent gets to place them. But after that, these things can move 12 inches. So these things, if they don't get within 1 inch of enemies, can contest objectives or grab objectives. I really am going to say that I don't think that generated units like these should be able to contest objectives. I think that this right here, I haven't dug into it too much, but I think there is so much you can do that can just break the game, that can be so unfun for opponents who just are basically getting inundated with just all these created units and effectively just have them auto lose because they can have all these little spores that can just contest things. Of course, I have 3 more units of spores because spores are broken. I mean, again, this is the commonality in all these lists. Spores. Spores are just ridiculous. And of course, I'm going to include them in every army because, in a competitive sense, they're absolutely crazy. So, this is what I call an ambush heavy list. Let's just go into a couple of the other ones. Here, I have got this is what I call basically sort of a stalling list where I have a lot of spores that can just move around. I do have an ambushing hive lord because he's just crazy good. Why not include him? But the other thing that I'm doing in this list is I've got this pheromones upgrade here. In this list, what I do is I try and stall out. I have like some soul snatchers and some ravenous beasts that are scouted up. I have them hidden behind buildings. And I've got some synapse floaters here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stall my opponent out. I'm going to try and have a lot of what I call trash drops, which are like these assault currents moving around here. I've got the spores moving, my little guy who's moving. And what he's going to do is he's going to move up one of these 2 soul snatchers or ravenous beasts. Then the synapse floaters are going to cast flying on one of these units. They're just basically going to move up and basically be able to charge the backfield. That gives them almost a 22-inch threat range. So between these ravenous beasts and these soul snatchers, they're going to be able to charge anything, even at the very back. Even if you have something hidden in the far back of the field, this sort of unit can just charge anything. So let's just again, this is what I call activation stall. Not only can they charge it, but you can also sort of wait for your opponent to use all his key activations. Then these guys can just charge something, kill it, and your opponent can't countercharge. So just another strategy that Alien Hives can use. All right, here's a shooting list. A shooting list has two of these veteran warriors that are just cheap. I've got pheromones on them so they can move around here. Two units of Hive Guardians that have got these heavy Ravager guns, which are crazy good, 18-inch range, AP2. With the pheromones, you can get these guys shooting turn one. I've got some shooter grunts as well that are going to be served as min-my chaff. Hey, look, in this one, I actually have four combined units of six spores. So that if I'm facing a hand-to-hand unit, they're going to have to, I can use these guys as chaff and basically just force someone who charges in hand-to-hand with them to take 12 automatic hits. Also a massive spore as well. Two mortar beasts so that can actually create more spores. So this is where I'm just sort of abusing. I could have actually had a third mortar beast if I wanted to, but I think a flamer beast is super good. But here I'm just abusing spores. I'm having every turn I can get literally on average generate 1 to 2 additional spores. Meanwhile, all these guys are shooting. I've got synapse floaters that are shooting. I've got my Hive Guardians. I've got my veteran warriors and shooter grunts. This is just an extremely unfun list to play. Like, I would hate to play against this list because you basically just stack spores in front of your opponent while you shoot them down. And your opponent, if they have any hand-hand units, have to charge into these spores and have them automatically explode in their face. Very unfun. I haven't played this armor yet, but I just imagine this would be a really nasty and unfun unit to play. So just wanted to point that out there. All right, so those are four of these armies. Let's just take a little time and let's just look at the actual army list in general. So this is just the Alien Hives page. We'll talk about a few other things that I want to cover. Again, one of the things, this explode, I think one of the things that makes Alien Hive such a ridiculous army is that they have access to these cheap units that can just explode. Another thing that they get access to, I think a lot of is, we already talked about this psychic synapse. Synapse floaters are they are the most powerful spellcasting unit in the game. And I think I go back into it. Alien Hives have some of the best psychic spells in the game. In addition to having the best psychic unit in the game, they've got spells that they can do so much with. The -1 morale is an awesome ability to just really be able to cause things to break. The other thing they have is the flying, right? The flying spell on level 2, which means that every turn they can put flying on 2 units. It is very difficult to stop this. It's very difficult when you can have units that have fast and Strider, well, not even Strider, but just have fast and are hand to hand and can now basically teleport over any units that could try and block them. These units, like Soul Snatchers and Ravager Beasts, they can hit what they want. They can hit those key units behind the chaff and just kill them. The 3-inch regen is also 18-inch regen is also a really great spell that you can in other words, if your opponent has a lot of rending, don't cast it. But if they do have rending, it's actually a really good upgrade. I love having regeneration as optional in this army, right? We know that regeneration can get countered, but to sort of have regeneration as an option to use it when its benefits to you is great. Some of the units I've already covered them. The Hive Lord is just crazy. It's a ridiculous one. They also have a very cheap veteran warrior, and the veteran warrior has pheromones. And I think that pheromones, again, in this army, getting pheromones it's so powerful in this army. The Hive Lord as well. One of the things to note here is that he gets access to ambush 3. By the way, a lot of leader units can't get things like advanced tactics and caster 3. They have to choose. Alien Hives is I think one of the few armies that can actually kind of dump a lot of special abilities to get caster 3 and pheromones, or caster 3 is so powerful that you can stack these things, that you can just stack all these abilities on a really tough character. I really think that they need to relook at like really reducing the amount of special abilities that they can stack on the Hive Lord. Um, OPA really needs to relook at this army. They need to nerf some things, and we'll get into this. This Natural Lord is, of course, a really awesome character on its own. I think that honestly, the Veteran Warrior and Prime Warrior, also these Veteran Warriors can get some really good guns. I think that this is a terrific one here. That I had my other one where these guys are just walking around here shooting their 30-inch. They're staying in the back. They're using their pheromones to move the units up, and they're just hey, they're just shooting things. So really good here. All right, Assault Grunts. We got into it before. These guys have two of the best upgrades in the game that are so granular. Remember, a lot of other armies, their special abilities are sort of prepackaged into their units. Not Alien Hives. Alien Hives can pick and choose the upgrades they need. These are great upgrades for 5 points apiece. You don't have to include them, or you do. They get, by the way, two of the AP4s as well. I honestly wouldn't, I would never buy these because of quality 5. But these two upgrades are terrific to either keep or not. They are so maneuverable. Shooter grunts, almost incredible you go for this. 110 points for two shots at AP1 apiece is really great. I wouldn't buy any of the upgrades except for maybe the Flamer one here. But yeah, these guys are just great for 110. Winged Grunts, I had these in my ambush army. You buy these guys with the minus with the 6-inch one. Here, this is in my ambush or shooting army, right? Where at putting these guys at 130 points for 10 of them, or you can do 260 points. You drop these guys in ambush, and then they can just move up and shoot 40 times into a unit or 20 times at AP1. It is a massive amount of shots. Winged grunts are great. Psycho grunts, we haven't get to the spell warden, which can buff them. I mean, there are so many of these units, which like I showed you 4 army lists, but there is countless other combinations you can do. We've already talked about soul snatchers and just the real power that's in our Hive Warriors, I think, are good. I think I would always pay the extra points and go for Hive Guardians. I think that Hive Guardians for just really, a few points more, they don't have Fearless, but that quality 3 and depth 3 on them. I mean, like, I think the Hive Guardians are just always a better pick than Hive Warriors. I know not the Fearless, but the pluses. And these Hive Guardians are just terrific. They get access to some great weapons. Heavy Ravager gun, I think, is particularly awesome. But they can, again, one of the things you can actually go a bit of a shooting heavy list with these guys as well. So I think that these Hive Guardians are terrific. Arm them, of course, with hand to hand as well. Again, you can make these guys a hand to hand unit as well. Just really pick and choose your adventure with these Hive Guardians. A Hive Swarm is a great unit of chaff. I think that you would always go for spores, but if you have the models, I think that hive swarms are great as well. Fearless, by the way, quality 6 and fearless. What a great use. And Strider, this is just a terrific one. Ravenous Beast, we already talked about how just incredible unit this is that have again two meaningful upgrades, ambush or scout. Most units can only get one of the two. Shadow Leapers are sort of Ravenous Beasts just with stealth, but you can double down on them. Venom floaters are great. Where you can give a shrouding mist. That's great. We already talked about synapse floaters being the most best caster unit, probably best unit in the game. Flamer beasts are great. Spores and massive spores are just ridiculous. The mortar beast, I'll go into it one more time, have an absolutely broken ability, which is spores, the ability to create new units that in an objective-based game can now contest and control objectives. I really think that they should errata this and make that these spores can't contest the objectives. We'll get into that and some possible nerfs. I would never go for the Carno Rex, so I think that some of their monsters being quality 4 aren't worth it. I know you could go for these. They're okay. I would honestly say you would always go for their Titans. All their Titans are quality 3. Each of them are good in their own right. I think the Burrow, like they have other Titans which are great, but the problem is it's hard to compete against the Burrower. A Burrower is just for some extra points. Obviously, you're gonna double up on all those serrated claws. Give him regen if you want to, but it is just like yes, you can look at the rest of their titans, and the rest of their titans are good, but this burrower here with quality 3, I think is just it's one of the things that make alien hives. Really, this unit, I think, even compared to some of the A tier armies, is just head and shoulders above anything that the one page rules are going to face. So with that, let's continue on. All right, so we've looked at these lists, we've covered it in detail. Let's look at some proposed fixes. So, if I would propose some fixes and some nerfs to this army, the first thing I think that has to happen is their Titans have to go to quality 4, especially that Burrower. That Burrower, I think at quality 4 would make it a little better. Another thing I think that would really help bring the army in line with the rest of the armies is the serrated claw needs to have one less attack. We actually see this in a lot of other armies that when it's AP4, they technically have one less attack. I think that when a serrated claw only has two attacks AP4, it's taking those 12 AP4 attacks and taking it down to 8. It just feels better. I don't know what to do with spores. I think that spores are just one of these armies in Alien Hives that just make the army ridiculous. Um, I think that the artillery guy, they should remove that spore special rule. It's either that or just make it so that these spores can't contest or take objective. Maybe spores putting them in units of 5 would help. As you saw in my 4 armies, spores were in everything. They are just ridiculous. So I think those are two possible ways to deal with spores. I think at the very least making them so that they can't contest objectives. That artillery beast that can create spores every turn if it misses is it's going to be problematic. Um, so yeah, and from what I have heard in the community, I've had several. I'll say it again. Several people have reached out to me privately and have basically said things like, "We're tired of playing Alien Hives. We're tired of basically getting destroyed by this army." So I wanted to sort of put this up to the community that I think this army is already causing problems. And I think that if we ever want to sort of take this game seriously in a balanced perspective, gonna have to deal with Alien Hives. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'd love to get feedback. Like, subscribe, and comment. And if you're in Austin, you can always join the Austin Alternative Gaming Freaks. Thank you guys so much.